You are listening to the Certified Personal Trainer Podcast, a show by personal trainers for personal trainers. It's time to become a better trainer, get more clients, and change more lives. And now, here's your host, the head coach and founder of Fitness Mentors, Eddie Lester.
Hey guys, welcome to Fitness Mentors Certified Personal Trainer Podcast, episode number 23. Today I wanted to talk about program design for the personal trainer as it relates to in-person training and online personal training. So we have to understand that program design is one of the key pieces of, really what guides our clients through the process of exercise towards a specific goal. And when we think about the difference between in-person training and online personal training, it's really not going to be too much different aside from the fact that you're really completing assessments either online or in person. So when we think about that process versus online assessments versus in-person assessments, you aren't quite as able to do as many assessments online as you are in person. And so therefore, the tracking of your client's results needs to be different. What does that look like? Basically, you're going to have to, as opposed to doing, we'll say like a skin fold caliper method body fat assessment, you might more have to go off of something like a before and after photo and really keep it more simplified in the how or what it looks like when they achieve their goal. But aside from assessments, it gets pretty dang similar when you think about creating a custom program for an online personal training client or an in-person training client. So today I really wanted to go over, kind of just the basic process of program design. And a lot of this is pulled straight from our program design specialist certification that is under our continuing education tabs on our site. But it's really about taking your programming and making it very science-based and driven. So when we think about, what really guides the program design, it's really going to be the client's goals. And obviously, as we know, people adapt to exercise. So really when we think about that, you really have to start to think about, what adaptations do my clients need and how can I provide them the best method of getting there through exercise? So we'll definitely, whenever we get to start to talk about program design, we always bring up the word periodization. Periodization is basically says that you will get used to the same exercise over time. And basically in that sense, when we start to think about the general adaptation syndrome, you're really focused on the shock phase, which occurs maybe for the first 1 to 2 weeks and someone's really not used to an exercise and they're very, we'll say even excessively sore because that's the response to that exercise. Then you have the adaptation phase, which is really going to be somewhere in that 3 to 4 weeks in which they start to slowly get used to that program and their actual output has increased because they are more adapted to it. And then you have the plateau phase, which usually happens anywhere from about 4 to 6 weeks, in which the body fully adapts and there's no further benefit from that exact program. So when we think about periodization, why do we do periodization? It's really to avoid plateau. And when we think about plateau, once we get to plateau, that means you need to change up the exercise, otherwise there is no further benefit from the body. So when we think about periodization, it basically means we're breaking up our programs into pretty much 4-week increments. If you're very advanced in fitness, you might even go more the 2 to 3 week increments of switching it up. But for most personal training clients, I'd say 95% of them, and they're mainly focused on normal goals, not, we'll say, extreme athletic goals. A 4-week program per program, periodized, is going to be a great way to go. So when we think about that, it's really just about, how do you create a program that's new and unique to the individual? Well, any program that they've done in the past, if it's been more than, I'd say, 3 to 6 months, they can repeat and improve upon that. But the one thing that you don't want to do is really just continue with the same program or the same exercises or the same acute variables over, we'll say, one program to the next, because your body needs to adapt. So when we think about program design is about choosing acute variables that lead to the proper response that will lead to your client's goals. So when we think about the acute variables, I'll run through them really quick, but when we create a program, it's about choosing these acute variables as they relate to the client's goals. So we have repetitions, we have tempo, we have sets, we have time under tension, we have our load, which is the weight that the client is lifting, you have your rest period, and then even beyond that, you have the type of exercise that they're doing. Also, you have to think of the exercise order, the order in which you program the exercise, and also basically the total training volume. When you think about these specific acute variables, certain acute variables lean more towards, we'll say, a weight loss goal. Other acute variables might lead more towards hypertrophy and gaining muscle. And then other acute variables might lead more towards power or even strength. So, you guys have gone through this in your personal training certifications, but really just the ones that I kind of want to point out that are most important for you to choose as a personal trainer are really going to be these 5, which basically will allow you to kind of just choose these and get going. So how many repetitions is your client doing? Okay. Based on specific goals, you should have a number in mind. If they're a brand new client, or they're going for weight loss or just a simple goal that doesn't include strength, hypertrophy, or power, your rep range is typically going to be above 12 and a 12 to 20, 12 to 30, just really above that hypertrophy mark, which is somewhere around that 12 to 20 range. If you're looking more for a client to gain muscle, you might be in that 8 to 12, 6 to 12 range, in which really it's taxing the glycolytic system of the muscle, therefore forcing we'll say excessive muscle damage because you've increased the load, and allowing the muscle to, we'll say, adapt through growth in strength and in size. And then when you think about the power and strength, if your client has those types of goals, that's when you're more focused on the 1 to 5 rep ranges. So obviously, when you think about creating a program, right there you can switch up 3 different types of programs just by choosing a rep range. Okay. Next, we have tempo. Tempo is basically going to be, as you know, the total time it takes to do 1 repetition. Different tempos align with different goals as well. When we think about an example tempo, maybe something for a brand new client, you might want a slow tempo, something maybe like a 4-1-1, a 4-2-1, basically 4 seconds eccentric, 2 seconds paused, and then 1 second concentric. That's basically how you're reading tempo. So like a 4-2-2 is 4 seconds eccentric, 2 seconds isometric, and then 2 seconds concentric. That's an 8 seconds to do 1 repetition. That's a very slow tempo. That's more geared towards the endurance and we'll say lighter, or basically lighter loads, more towards that strength, endurance, and even stability elements of training. If your clients have those goals, they should have longer tempos. When we think about moving tempos more towards the hypertrophy, you can keep a moderate to tempo is typically accepted. Something around the, we'll say 202, 211, 101. Those are all acceptable for hypertrophy. That's focused on that kind of middle levels, levels 2, 4, and 5 of the form model, which is our model. But and then when we start to think about maximal strength and power, that's when you're really focusing on explosive concentric tempos. Okay, you can go a little bit slower on the other types of tempos, or like eccentric. You can do a slow eccentric and then a power on the concentric if you want. But basically, you want to move more faster with if a client is focused on power and strength. Obviously, sets, guys, it's just a given number of repetitions. The set range does matter. When you're focused on gaining muscle, you obviously want a larger number of sets. When you're focused on, we'll say, just general stability and maybe a muscular endurance, that's where you're more looking for a lower range of sets with multiple different exercises that challenge the stability of the body. Super simple there. Obviously, a higher number of sets for a more well-trained individual, things like that. And then we have the last one is going to be load. Load is going to be important because you really want to focus on safety with your client, as well as certain loads are more geared towards certain goals. Heavier loads are obviously more geared towards strength and power. Lighter loads are more towards that stability and muscular endurance. And then hypertrophy has that middle load that really taxes the body to more towards that failure point of the load under 12 reps. Okay. So when we start to think about, what does all of this lead to? How do we create an effective program? In our program design specialists, we really emphasize the fact that if you have a certain goal, you stick to the parameters associated with that goal. Okay. And when we start to think about what does that look like, let's say somebody has a stability goal. It's very simple. Okay, what is the rep range? Well, I'm going to choose 12, or we'll say 15 reps for every exercise. Then what is the number of sets? I'm going to do 1 to 3 sets of 2 different exercises, or let's say I'm going to do 2 sets of 2 different exercises per body part. And then you're going to go to the load, or we'll say that the tempo. The tempo then is going to be slow and controlled, so maybe like a 4-1-1, a slow eccentric, 1 second pause, and then a 1 second concentric. Then you have to go to the rest period. Because it's not too taxing on the body, because it's a slower and we'll say maybe not as difficult to the muscle, we're going to do a shorter rest period, something around we'll say 30 seconds in between sets. And that's really, guys, how you're going to create a program. Very simply put, all you have to do to create an effective program towards a goal is find out what the goal is and then pick acute variables to match that goal. Then, how do you get creative with your exercise or with your programs? Is modify the exercises. If your client does a specific set of exercises during one program, the next program should be pretty much all brand new exercises, because for a fact that is going to create different demands for the body. So these are just some simple tips here when we start to think about, everyone freaks out when it's like, oh, how do I put together a program? Not everyone, but when we think about online training, they think, or some trainers think it's so much different than regular in-person training. If you're creating a customized online personal training program, you're going to go through just like you do with your normal clients. How do you get them towards a goal? By programming acute variables that lead to that goal. Guys, any program that gives someone a great resistance workout, a cardio workout, and has good nutrition will typically get them to their goal. Don't freak out when it comes to thinking about your program being perfect. Get an exercise on paper, choose the acute variables that match their goal, and boom, you're good. The only other thing that we have to think about is going to be the, we'll say, types of exercise as it relates to the specific goals as well. When we think about power and strength, we want more stable exercises. So sitting and or stable exercise tools or stable equipment, like a barbell for doing strength exercise is a very stable sort of tool to use. But if you're thinking more towards the stability and muscular endurance levels of training, you have to really think about the unstable elements like a BOSU ball, a stability ball, resistance bands, things that might not be as stable are used, and those exercises that match stabilizing, or the exercises that have stabilizing elements, are definitely more geared towards the stabilization phase, or you could even say fat loss is great for more stabilization style exercises, depending on kind of your approach. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, guys, if you're eating well, you're exercising both cardiovascularly and through resistance training, you're going to lose fat. So when somebody wants to lose fat and gain muscle at the same time, you can put them in a hypertrophy program and they would see great results as long as their nutrition and cardiorespiratory exercise match, or we'll say are up to the task. So when we think about these types of exercises, what types of equipment are great for, we'll say, coordination, postural control, skill development, like the GPP phase, or stabilization training? You have like PVC pipes, exercise boards, even some body weight, lighter dumbbells. When we think about balance, we think about the medicine ball, or a stability ball, a balance disc, a foam pad. When we think about more stabilization elements, your basically, a TRX is also a great tool. When we start to think about speed, agility, and more power, that's when we start to think about different exercise tools like the agility ladder, maybe boxes, cones for doing drills, even sometimes kettlebells or barbells for mainly like Olympic lifting styles. And then when we think about hypertrophy, we want stable exercises with stable exercise tools. So hypertrophy is the most commonly known, we'll say, types of fitness tools, because that's where a lot of resistance training has its roots, is in more bodybuilding style, hypertrophy style exercises. So your barbells, your dumbbells, your cables, your kettlebells, your strength training machines, those are going to be geared towards hypertrophy and even strength. Okay, and when we start to think about strength, it's about the stablest exercise tools and the stablest exercises possible. So barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, stones, kegs, tires, things like that. Those are more geared towards strength. And then the final thing I wanted to touch on today, when we think about program design in general, is the exercise order. A lot of people don't incorporate exercise order as often as you could, in a sense. When we think about exercise order, what is the primary goal of the client as far as achieving a body part positive look, or a look on maybe their arms? So let's say a client says, "Oh, I want to lose fat, I want to gain some muscle, but I really want broader shoulders." Okay, when we think about exercise order means exercise 1. Day 1, you should be focused on that particular exercise, or the exercise that would build those broader shoulders. If we remember, every exercise that you do in sequential order, the further exercises along the path are slightly affected. So if somebody has the primary focus of building a broader shoulders, you should be doing the we'll say pull-ups and an overhead press first in the workout, first in the workout and first in the week, because that's when they're going to be the least tired and have the most training effect on those muscle groups. So exercise order does matter. It's not one of the primary things, but it does matter when it comes to also just paying attention to what your client wants and then doing that first, so they know that you've listened to them as well. All right, guys. So when we start to think about how can you put together a great program for an online training client, follow the FORM model, if for those of you that are Fitness Mentors certified, or follow the OPT model if you are NASM certified, follow the ACE IFT model if you're ACE certified. We basically have created a way, or these models create basically a direct sheet that you can just look at and say, okay, I want to pick my client wants to achieve fat loss. Okay, that means probably level 1 or 2, GPP level for us, or muscular endurance. And boom, go across, pick the reps and the tempo, pick the time under tension, or that's basically related to the reps and tempo, pick the number of sets, pick the rest period, pick the load, how many workouts per week can they perform, and then how many exercises per body part are you doing. That's the way that we encourage programming with the FORM model. Okay, so just basically go through with any new client that you have, based on their assessments. You also need to keep in mind maybe they might have some corrective exercise that needs to be done. Include those in their warm-up or their cool-down for corrective exercise, and then have the resistance training part of the program be very based on their goals relative to the training effects of the acute variables in programming. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's podcast. Hopefully you just got a little bit more confidence when we start to think about putting together a program. But when it really comes down to it, guys, you need to focus on listening to your client and then just creating the simplest program that can lead to their goal achievement. Don't get crazy with the acute variables. Pick something that you know will work for them and is easy to achieve, and you can always progress based on their feedback. So once again, as an online trainer, as an in-person trainer, just slowly progress every week. Change up the exercise program every 4 weeks, and you keep up those things with a decent cardiorespiratory program and solid nutrition, and maybe even some solid recovery program like effective sleep and some flexibility, foam rolling, things like that. That's really going to lead you to your client goals. So when you really think about success as a personal trainer, get something on the books, progress them, periodize, change up the program every 4 weeks, and you're good to go. All right, guys, thanks so much for checking out this podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below if you're on YouTube. Otherwise, shoot me an email, eddie@fitnessmentors.com. You can also feel free to call us or me almost anytime. I'm the one that typically answers the phones because I love hearing from you. 424-675-0476. And hope to hear from you soon, and enjoy all of these amazing tips on our site and through our podcasts below. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
As always, thanks for listening to the Certified Personal Trainer Podcast. You can learn more about fitness mentors at fitnessmentors.com. Be sure to share this podcast on social media. And remember, we are here to help you succeed.